Centralia is a borough in Pennsylvania's anthracite coal region that has become one of America's ghost towns because of a gold mine fire. The fire started in 1962 and is still burning today. The Native American tribes of the region sold the land to the colonial agents back in 1749, and in 1793, Robert Morse, a Revolutionary War hero and signer of the Declaration of Independence, acquired one-third of Centralia's valley land. When Morse had to declare bankruptcy in 1798, the land went to the Bank of the United States and was sold at auction in 1830 to Stephen Girard, but Stephen did very little with the land he bought. By 1832, Jonathan Faust opened the very first tavern, Bull's Head Tavern, which gave the town its first name. Eventually, in 1842, the Locust Mountain Coal and Iron Company bought the land. The coal company sent one of their mining engineers, Alexander Ray, to the area. Alexander moved his entire family and started planning the village. The first of two mines were opened in 1826, and Ray named the town originally Centerville, but it had to change it in 1865 because the United States Post Office already had a Centerville in the county. Centralia was incorporated as a borough in 1866.
Hi guys, welcome to another adventure with Holly's Exploration and Urban Legends. Today, we're in Centralia, Pennsylvania, the town that is on fire underneath in the gold mines. I'm going to give you guys lots of history. I got lots of information on it. We're going to walk around. There's not much left, just some empty streets and a couple cemeteries and of course the famous graffiti highway. So let's go check it out. Okay, now we're going to go to St. Ignatius Cemetery. St. Ignatius Roman Catholic Church was one of the first churches here in Centralia. It's one of 7 that they eventually had. The first Roman Catholic priest, Father Ignatius Daniel McDermott,
Daniel Ignatius McDermott.
I get him mixed up. But anyway, he is said to, the locals say that he did a curse on Centralia. Back in the late 1800s, he was attacked by the Molly Maguires and believed that they were a part of his congregation. Now, these Molly Maguires, they also attacked the founder and killed and murdered him on the road out of town, 61, Mount Carmel. But anyway, the curse goes that one day the Catholic Church would be the only one left standing. Since he kind of was right. It did stand. It closed in 1995, and then in 1997 they tore it down, but they did leave the cemetery. So we're going to go check it out.
Unfortunately, on October 17, 1868, Ray was ambushed, murdered, and robbed on a trip between Centralia and Mount Carmel by a group of men who were later identified as Molly Maguires. Several men were arrested right away for the murder, but they were soon acquitted and the murder would go unsolved until 1876. Father Daniel Ignatius McDermott of the St. Ignatius Roman Catholic Church in Centralia suspected the killers of the town founder were members of the congregation, so he began denouncing the Molly Maguires. Because of his remarks to the congregation, Father McDermott was attacked at the church cemetery in retaliation. After his attack, Father McDermott made his way back to the church, rang the bell to some of the townspeople. The legend among the townfolk is that night of the attack, after summoning the town, Father McDermott placed a curse on the town. He said that there would one day be only St. Ignatius Roman Catholic Church standing. Finally, in 1876, authorities had a confession about the murder of Alexander Ray. Kelly the Bomb confessed he was a member of the Molly Maguires. He also stated that he killed Ray, but he also had accomplices, Patrick Hester, Patrick Tully, and Peter McHugh, who were also said to be members of that gang. So, who were the Molly Maguires anyway? Well, the Mollies were a group of Irish immigrants who formed a secret society shielded by the ancient order of Hibernarians, the Irish American fraternal group, which used violence to try to improve working and living conditions. The group originally came from North Central Ireland and in the 1840s, who also used violence to improve the terrible working and living conditions of its citizens. During the Great Potato Famine, millions of Irish immigrated to America and settled in the area in search of work, but they were met with a lot of discrimination based on their religion and heritage. Most places would not hire them, and they were forced to take the most physically demanding and dangerous mining jobs. The men and their families were forced to live in overcrowded, company-owned housing and had to get their supplies from company-owned shops, and if they needed to, they had to see the company-owned doctors. These company-owned businesses were not cheap, and by the end of the month, most would owe their employers instead of getting a paycheck. And by the 1860s, Centralia was a hotbed for the secret society, and between 1861 and 1875, a series of violent assaults, fires, and murders were blamed on the Mollies. When the Civil War broke out, most miners were drafted. Because immigrant miners saw the war as a rich man's war, they rebelled against the draft. The Mollies were known also to use coffin notices to threaten death, and they were delivered to the mining supervisors who were planning to fill their roles during the strikes. As working and living conditions got worse for the miners, so did the violence. A total of 24 mine foremen and supervisors were assassinated. By the mid-1870s, Franklin B. Gowen, president of the Philadelphia Coal and Iron Company, had enough of the Molly Maguires and hired Pinkerton detective James McParland to infiltrate the organization. McParland spent about 18 months working undercover. Even though suspicions were raised in 1875 when the first conviction of a Molly, McParland was able to hang in there a little while longer and finally slipped away. The Mollies were arrested by a private police force of Gowen's Philadelphia Reading Railroad. A total of 20 Mollies were convicted and sentenced to death, mostly on McParland's testimony, along with the confessions from informers who turned state's evidence to save their own necks. On June 21, 1877, 10 of those men were executed. That day is known as Black Thursday. Even though the existence of the Molly Maguires as a secret society of outlaw Americans is debated by historians, because of the mystery and the secrecy around them, most will agree the trials and executions were a shocking corruption of the justice system. In 1979, more than 100 years after the execution of John Kehoe, the supposed king of the Mollies, Pennsylvania granted him a full pardon. In some way, I guess Father McDermott was right, because St. Ignatius remained standing through most of the fire, but finally closed in June of 1995. It still remained standing until about November 1997 when it was demolished because of being in the impact zone. Coal mining started to decline when the U.S. became involved in World War I because many of the young men left to go to war. After the war, it continued to decline because of strikes and a new form of energy like fuel oil, which had a higher heat and was cleaner to burn than coal. When the stock market crashed in 1929, it forced Lehigh Valley Coal Company to close 5 of its mines around Centralia. In desperation, many of the coal miners that were left unemployed began bootleg mining. These men would enter abandoned mines to extract coal using a technique called pillar robbing, which removed the coal that supported the roof of the mine, causing many of them to collapse. By 1941, things were starting to improve for coal mining, but it didn't last long. In 1950, Centralia Council acquired the rights to the minerals beneath the town, and coal mining continued there until the 1960s. When most of the coal companies began to shut down, bootleg mining continued through the early 1980s. The remaining coal companies started using techniques called strip and open pit mining, which they still use today. Finally, in 1966, the rail service to Centralia ended. Centralia coal mines caught fire in 1962. Now, there are several theories of what may have started the underground fire. One theory states that the fire began with an attempt to clean up the town landfill. In May of 1962, the city council hired 5 volunteer firefighters to clean up the landfill, which was in a strip mine in a pit next to the Oddfellows Cemetery. Cleanup of the landfill had been done before, but that was when it was in a different location. On May 27, 1962, firefighters set the dump on fire to let it burn. When they put the fire out, it was not completely extinguished, and hot coals from the fire fell into an unsealed opening in a pit, which entered the abandoned coal mine beneath Centralia. Another theory states that the previous day, when a trash hauler dumped hot coals into the open trash pits, it caught fire. Minutes from the June 24, 1962 meetings refer to 2 fires in that landfill that day. The borough is responsible for installing clay barriers between each layer of trash, but for some reason they fell behind, leaving the task incomplete. The final theory I found stated that the base colliery fire in 1932 was never fully extinguished and finally reached Centralia's landfill by 1962. This theory has been disputed by a man named Frank Jurgill Sr., who claims he and his brother operated a bootleg mine near the landfill from 1960 to 1962. He states that if the base fire still burned, he and his brother probably would have been killed by the gases that would have came from the interconnected tunnels. The scale of the fire was not really realized by Centralia citizens until about 1979, when a gas station owner and also mayor, John Coddington, inserted a dipstick into one of his underground tanks to check the levels. Upon removing the dipstick, he noticed that it was hot, so he inserted a thermometer into the tank. When John removed the thermometer, he discovered the temperature of the gas was 172 degrees. The last remaining church today is the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary Ukrainian Catholic Church. Most people will recognize the church as the fictional Silent Hill Church. The church was built in 1911 and is the last of the original 7 churches. The other churches, which have now been demolished, were the First United Methodist Church from 1863 to 1985, Holy Trinity Episcopal from 1866 to 1966, Presbyterian from 1867 to 1954, St. Ignatius Roman Catholic Church 1869 to 1995, First English Baptist Church 1887 to 1917, and St. Peter and Paul Russian Orthodox 1916 to 1986. The reason the church had been spared from the same fate as almost everything else in Centralia is the location. According to a geological survey, the church was built on top of rock, not coal. Today, the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church has a thriving parish and is now declared a location of holy pilgrimage in 2016. Many of the current and former residents of Centralia believe the state's eminent domain claim was a plot to gain mineral rights to the coal under the town. According to state law, when the municipality can no longer function as a municipal government, which means no longer any residents, the borough ceases to exist. At that point, the mineral rights owned by the borough of Centralia, which is not privately held anymore, revert to the ownership of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Centralia has been used as a model for several fictional ghost towns and manifestations of hell. Dean Koontz used Centralia as an example for Strange Highways, as well as David Wellington's Vampire Zoo. Roger Avray researched Centralia while working on the screenplay for Silent Hill, and in 1982 there was a documentary on PBS, Centralia Mindfire, which included interviews of the residents. In 1987, the film, Made in USA, opens in Centralia, and other documentaries were done in 2007 called The Town That Was. There has also been a segment on the Travel Channel series American Declassified in 2013. It is said the fire under Centralia is still burning today and is thought to continue for about another 250 years.
Alright guys, that's it for our trip to Centralia. Please like, subscribe, comment below, and I'll see you on our next adventure. Thanks.